Okay, you have to hear about this.
Well, yeah. What's up?
I just stumbled upon something truly, well, mind-bending, and I'm not kidding, my brain feels different.
Different how? Intriguing.
It's called the Supermind Signal, and get this, it's supposed to be this sound wave rooted in all sorts of serious-sounding neuroscience from America and Europe.
Okay. Soundwave neuroscience.
Yeah, and it supposedly can actually tap into your brain's alpha waves and, wait for it, maybe even boost your brain power and, like, totally change the game for you.
Right. The idea of using external stimuli like sound
Hmm.
to influence brain activity isn't entirely new, of course. We know the brain has rhythms.
Exactly.
Folks like Harry Jasper were mapping these out way, but, laying the groundwork.
Seriously. And the wild thing, it's ridiculously simple. Like, almost too simple.
How simple are we talking?
We're talking about popping on some headphones for literally 8 minutes. Just 8.
8 minutes. That's it.
Yeah. No trying to quiet your thoughts. No weird chanting. Definitely no, like, studying involved. Honestly, I was picturing some really complicated brain training thing.
Well, that simplicity is definitely part of the appeal, I imagine, this Supermind signal. It sounds like it's designed to work more on a subconscious level,
It's the idea, yeah.
using something they call advanced brain entrainment to encourage those alpha waves.
Right, getting them more dominant by synchronizing the electrical activity across both hemispheres of your brain.
Oh, the hemisphere synchronization idea, getting the left and right sides firing together at the same frequency.
Yeah. And they say it creates a more integrated, efficient brain state. That's the pitch, anyway.
Okay. And the claims about when it starts working.
This is the craziest part. They're claiming it starts to do its thing the very first time you listen.
The first time. Wow.
I mean, come on, 8 minutes to potentially unlock some hidden brain power. It almost sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right?
It certainly makes you wonder about the immediacy and the extent of that impact.
Exactly.
Well, the principle of entrainment does suggest that our brain waves can respond pretty quickly, almost in real time, to external rhythms, translating that initial shift into a significant, noticeable boost in overall brain function after just one short session. That's something we probably need to explore a bit deeper.
Absolutely, because, you sent this over, and I'm always looking for those little edges, ways to just be a bit sharper.
Right.
So the Supermind signal is all about these alpha waves, then. What exactly are they, and why are they supposedly this, like, magic key to unlocking our supermind?
Exactly. Alpha waves. They're a specific type of brainwave. Think of them oscillating in the frequency range of about 8 to 12 cycles per second. Hertz, we call it.
8 to 12 hertz. Okay.
We often see them when the brain is in a state of relaxed wakefulness.
Relaxed wakefulness.
Yeah.
Like daydreaming.
Kind of, yeah. Think of when you're calmly reflecting on something, maybe daydreaming a little. You're not intensely focused, but you're definitely not asleep either.
Okay, I know that feeling, that kind of peaceful, almost like meditative state.
Mm-hmm.
So the theory is if we can somehow pump up those alpha waves, we can tap into the zone of calm focus, which then translates to better cognitive performance. Is that it?
That's the central hypothesis, yeah. And look, there is research connecting alpha wave activity to various cognitive functions.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. There was a study back in 2012, Nen and colleagues. They looked at alpha neurofeedback training and short-term memory, found some encouraging results.
Neurofeedback.
Yeah, and another one more recently, 2021, Grothland and colleagues, they explored using neurofeedback to modulate alpha activity in more like everyday learning scenarios. So there's definitely a link being explored scientifically.
Okay, now neurofeedback, that sounds like you're actively trying to train your brain, right? Like consciously.
Generally, yes.
Is that the same ballpark as this passive brain entrainment that the Supermind signal talks about, just listening?
Not quite the same thing, no. Neurofeedback is usually a more active process. You're often hooked up to sensors, maybe an EEG.
Right. Seeing your brain waves.
Exactly. Monitoring your brain activity in real time, and you get feedback, visual, auditory, that helps you learn to consciously control those patterns.
Ah, okay.
Brain entrainment, on the other hand, is more about passively exposing your brain to an external rhythm, like this sound wave, hoping your brain waves will naturally sort of synchronize with that frequency. Less active effort.
Got it. So the Supermind signal is aiming for that effortless synchronization through sound. Okay. They also mention getting the neurons in both hemispheres of your brain to sync up. Why is that supposed to be such a big deal? Is there some special advantage to having both sides working in perfect harmony?
Well, the idea of synchronizing the brain hemispheres, it has been around for a while.
Hmm.
And there's definitely a popular notion that it leads to enhanced cognitive abilities, the whole left brain, right brain synergy thing.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And while it's absolutely true that communication between the hemispheres is vital for countless brain functions,
Sure.
the idea that you can just force them into perfect lockstep, like with a sound wave, for this massive cognitive boost, that's maybe not fully supported by current neuroscience in that simple way.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a paper back in '87 by Thomas Hines that actually critiques some of those overly simplistic left brain, right brain theories that were popular then.
That makes sense. It kind of reminds me of those old myths about like only using 10% of our brains or something.
Exactly. It's often more nuanced. So while alpha waves are definitely linked to certain mental states that can be helpful for learning and relaxation,
Right.
the idea that this specific sound wave can instantly create some kind of massive life transformation, well, that's where we need to keep our critical thinking caps on, what do you say?
Definitely. Absolutely. And they provide references. You mentioned some touching on alpha and PTSD.
Yes, the Nicholson study from 2023 on normalizing alpha rhythms in PTSD through neurofeedback is certainly interesting work.
But it's still a significant leap, you're saying, to assume that just passive listening will produce the same kind of lasting, meaningful changes as active neurofeedback therapy.
It's a different mechanism, and likely a different scale of effect, yes. The claims need careful consideration.
And they really emphasize that it works from the very first listen. Is it even plausible that you'd feel a noticeable effect that quickly with this kind of brain entrainment?
It's certainly possible to experience a temporary shift in your mental state while or shortly after listening to specific auditory patterns.
Okay.
For example, if the sound wave is designed to be relaxing, you might well feel a sense of calm pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Our brains are naturally responsive to rhythms.
Right.
However, whether that immediate subjective feeling translates into a fundamental, long-lasting improvement in overall brain power, as the marketing might suggest, that's still, I'd say, an open question. Needs more evidence.
Okay, let's dig a bit deeper into this activate your alpha claim. What does that really mean, like at the level of brain activity? Are we talking about a huge, measurable surge of alpha waves across the entire brain, or?
Activation, in this context, likely refers to an increase in the prevalence, maybe the strength or amplitude of alpha wave activity, probably in specific brain regions.
Okay, not everywhere necessarily.
Probably not uniformly, no. And we can measure these changes using tools like EEG, but the degree and the consistency of this activation, it can vary a lot. Depends on the individual, the specific characteristics of the sound wave itself, and various other factors.
So it's not like flipping a single switch that just turns on alpha waves everywhere at the same intensity.
Unlikely to be that simple, no. The brain's pretty complex.
And the fact that they say you don't need to do anything else, no active effort like meditation, that sounds great, especially for people who might find those practices difficult.
It does have that appeal, yes. Low barrier to entry.
But could that also mean that the effects might be more superficial or perhaps shorter-lived compared to active practice?
That's a very insightful point. Practices like meditation, they involve active engagement, right?
Yeah.
You're learning to regulate your own mental states over time. Neurofeedback also requires that active participation.
Right, you're learning a skill.
Oh, exactly. A
Yeah.
passive approach like just listening might offer more immediate, but potentially more transient effects. The long-term impact, the depth of change achieved through active practices, that might be quite different. We don't know for sure without specific comparative studies on this particular signal, of course.
They've got this list of scientific references attached. We've touched on a few related to alpha waves and neurofeedback. Are there any others they cite that kind of stood out to you in connection to this whole supermind signal idea?
Well, it's interesting to see a reference to Baldwin's 1974 paper on kinetic art and subliminal stimulation.
Subliminal stimulation, how does that connect?
It's not directly about brain waves and sound, but it touches on this adjacent idea of influencing our perceptions and maybe our mental states below the level of conscious awareness. So conceptually related, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, Rosenboom's work from '72 explored using alpha brainwaves to generate sounds and light for artistic purposes, which just shows there's been this long-standing fascination with the link between brain activity and sensory experiences.
Fascinating. And there are also references to hypnagogic sleep and creativity, and even one about sleep problems and dementia. how do those pieces fit into the puzzle they're trying to build?
Yeah, those references seem to provide a broader context. They highlight just how crucial different brain states are for various cognitive functions, like creativity and memory consolidation,
Okay.
the hypnagogic state, that fuzzy period between waking and sleeping.
Yeah, right before you nod off.
Exactly. That's mentioned in some of the cited work, and it is often considered a time when creative insights might bubble up more easily. And the research on sleep problems and brain health, like the Sternitzik paper from 2013, just emphasizes the strong connection between healthy sleep patterns and overall brain function. So while these aren't directly about the supermind signal itself,
They support the general idea that brain states matter a lot for how well we think and feel.
precisely, they remind us that our cognitive performance is influenced by a whole range of factors, and optimizing our brain power is likely a multifaceted thing, not just down to one simple trick.
Okay, so to kind of bring our deep dive into the Supermind signal towards a close here, it's basically a sound wave designed to use brain entrainment to boost our alpha brain waves.
Hmm.
With this promise of increasing brain power, maybe even transforming our lives, all from just 8 minutes of listening.
That's the core concept, yeah. It's built upon, well-established principles of brain entrainment and these known associations between alpha brainwave activity and certain desirable mental states like relaxation-focused attention.
And we've definitely seen that there is scientific research out there that supports the idea that alpha activity plays a role in various cognitive functions,
Absolutely.
and that techniques like neurofeedback can be used to influence it.
Precisely. Those studies we mentioned, Grosselin on learning, Nan on memory, Nicholson in the context of PTSD, they all suggest potential benefits of modulating alpha rhythms. And Jasper's early work, of course, gave us the foundation.
Right. But, and this seems like a big but, it's really important for us to maintain a balanced perspective here.
Definitely.
The jump from passively listening to a sound wave for 8 minutes to achieving some profound and lasting transformation of our brain power, it might be a pretty significant leap, right?
It does seem like a significant leap based on the current understanding. And as you know, that 2011 paper by Hammond discusses, in the context of neurofeedback, the placebo effect is always something to keep in mind when we're evaluating the effects of any kind of intervention like this.
The power of belief.
It can be very powerful, yes. The relationship between specific brainwave frequencies and complex outcomes like, say, enhanced intelligence or a completely transformed life, it's likely incredibly complex, influenced by a multitude of factors.
So entrainment can change brainwaves.
It certainly can induce changes in brainwave activity, yes. But the long-term impact and the actual functional significance of those changes, especially from a purely passive listening experience like this claims to be, that's an area that likely requires much more specific, in-depth investigation.
Okay, so thinking about all this, considering how different states of mind, even those really subtle ones right on the edge of sleep, you mentioned the hypnagogic state.
Like in the Lacoste study in the MIT piece.
Right. Considering how those states can have such a big impact on our mental processes or creativity, what do you think the potential really is for us to consciously, or maybe even semi-consciously, influence our own brainwaves for the better?
That's a really great thought-provoking question to end on. It really highlights this ongoing journey, doesn't it? This exploration into the brain's amazing ability to adapt and change its plasticity,
Yeah.
and our potential to actively engage with its activity. As research in fields like neurofeedback, meditation, maybe even targeted sensory stimulation continues to advance, we'll undoubtedly gain a more nuanced understanding of how targeted interventions can support our cognitive function and overall well-being, but it's likely going to be more complex than a single 8-minute fix.
Yeah, makes sense. Ultimately, this whole Supermind Signal thing, whether it works exactly as advertised or not, it definitely brings up some really intriguing questions about how we can interact with our own minds, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Pushes us to think about the connection between our internal states and external stimuli.
It's definitely something to keep pondering. Lots to think about there.